So welcome to Genre Features of a Book Review. In this workshop, we're going to be talking about the sort of general genre features you might see coming up in book reviews, but then also what I will be guiding you into doing is really diving more deeply into features that are more specific to book reviews in your discipline, and then within different scholarly journals in your discipline. And one of the first things I'm going to show you is an example of what I mean. Two book reviews in two different scholarly journals. They're about the same book, but in this case, the journals are in two different disciplines, and we will talk about how they're set up. And then you'll be applying some conventions to, some of what you're learning to scholarly book reviews in your area, just so you can start getting a little more familiar with what would be expected of you if you were going to write a book review for a scholarly journal in your discipline. The reason we're talking about book reviews in this case is because, especially if you are still building your list of publications, especially in English, many of you are already well published in Russian and additional languages. But if you're still building your publication list on your CV in English, then book reviews are a very good way to start with that. If you're an advanced graduate student, that's another reason book reviews are a wonderful way to start. All right, so a genre: conventions about content, size, and style, combination of certain features that differentiate text, style of a source, dedicated to certain impressions or in goals, a way to wrap up your thoughts into language for a specific purpose. A particular type of writing, set of fixed linguistic features aimed at a certain goal. Very good. Yeah, these are great. And they all align with stylistically coherent, homogeneous, recognized by peers as a particular type of writing or text with a particular purpose. Very good. A set of rules given by culture, very much so, because genre can apply to many things beyond written text. Films, for example, which are visual texts. So I kind of wrapped all of what you said, but we're still kind of keeping it a little simple in terms of, we're not trying to cover every aspect of genre at the moment, but a genre is a set of agreed upon and expected conventions used by a specific or discourse community to produce communication for an intended purpose and or a specific context. And then I added this, or is it? And the reason I added that is simply because you want to think also beyond that there are a lot of social and cultural contributions to the way we think of genres as well. And so just kind of keep that back in the back of your mind, but we will basically be working from this definition. Good. Okay. So we're going to start with my guiding you through a very, very simple, short comparative analysis of some genre features in a couple of book reviews. But first, I want to show you two different opening paragraphs, introductions. These are on the same book called Artificial Whiteness: Politics and Ideology in Artificial Intelligence. So I want you to look at these, and I'm going to read them aloud just so you can hear. I'm going to change my tone deliberately. So the first one on the left: in Artificial Whiteness, Politics and Ideology in Artificial Intelligence, Yard Katz encourages the reader to step away from discourse that frames artificial intelligence as a purely technological development. Instead, the reader is guided through artificial intelligence's epistemological roots, the espoused values and priorities of its progenitors, its sources of research funding, and the marriage among academia, industry, and the American military that birthed it. By providing this context, Katz is able to more thoroughly examine and interrogate AI's principal service to structural white supremacy and imperialism, as well as how that service has been masked by a progressive veneer in recent years. So what I want you thinking about with this one is how they introduce a potentially very highly charged topic, sometimes very controversial, white supremacy, and then another similarly charged topic, imperialism. But I want you thinking about the word choices and way in which this topic was introduced, and where the positioning is of the author of the book in the introduction. Now, keeping those issues in mind, let's listen to the second introduction from a completely different journal. Whiteness and white supremacy have long occupied the central axis of almost all forms of power in the global North and West. In an age of technological ubiquity and smart algorithms, one may hope such justices could be absolved, but the opposite has been the case. White hegemony has intensified in the age of AI. Like all new media, AI's smartness arrives with numerous mythological encodings. It is more powerful than humans, will incite economic growth, mend climate change, remove bias from legal systems, accelerate scientific discovery, and reinvent journalism. However, as too many recent episodes of Google's racist algorithms have shown, such fantasies could not be further from reality. By the 2010s, critical AI studies in communications theory shed new light on so-called smart algorithms, revealing them as the perpetrators of injustice, dispossession, and discrimination. In essence, a total perversion of intelligence. Now, these are both introductory paragraphs to a review of the same book. And I want to ask you, what would you think if you read just these two introductions and were not told that they were both book reviews? What would your impressions be comparing the two? It does sound very much like a New York Times book review, kind of more general. That's an excellent description kind of what we see in those two introductions, right? Immediately the book is mentioned and the author in one, and it hasn't even shown up yet in the other. Your purpose as a reader really dictates too what you want to, which version you find more useful. If you want information more kind of general about the book, you start with the one on the left that starts introducing the book. But if you want a strong perspective from one scholar, you start with the one on the right. Yes, that's very true. So genre, it may on an objective screen be determined by the author and the publishing journal. But what you do with that genre in your head is about your purpose, right, for reading and interpreting that material. Excellent. So I'm going to quickly just introduce these, and then I'm going to come back and show you a couple of annotated versions. But I want to also introduce you to these. So one of these is from College and Research Libraries. One of these is from the IEEE Engineering Society, Annals of the History of Computing. One of these is Prometheus, and one of these is from Reorient. These are all different scholarly journals in widely different fields. They're not in any particular order, but I do want to show you now which one do you think is from IEEE, the engineering journal. It's one of these. The one on the right looks more like the IEEE, and what you would expect from the engineering, because it looks more structured. And that part of genre is visual, right? And it might not just be reviews, it could be kind of the presentation of the field of engineering in some respects. And this very prominent scholarly journal in the field of engineering and part of the IEEE International Engineering Organization. This is the one that seemed, and very rightly so, seemed like it could have been in a New York Times book review. And I'm going to now take us back, and then this is a journal for information and library science. The journal is called, let me go back, College and Research Libraries. So the reason it has to be more kind of broadly informational is so research librarians and college and university librarians can determine whether they want to add it to their collection. You should see this very colorful, somewhat confusing screen. And I've started annotating both of the two articles that I just showed you the introductions from. This is just to give you a couple of examples. I just want to show you some comparisons. So the first thing I want to show you is that I've made a note here. So the article is about 776 words long, and the author's name, Katz, is used approximately 12 times. I may have missed one or two, so that's why approximately. So immediately we get the use of Katz here. The book title and information are right at the beginning. And and as it goes on, we see more uses of the author's name. So the author, the positionality of the author of the book is woven through, because as a couple of you mentioned, the focus of this particular review is more on the book itself and what it's doing. So the author is pulled in, the author's name is pulled in. Another focus is you'll see these kind of light green and highlights for any mention just in the first few lines of readers, of us, anyone who is the reader. The reason I highlighted those is to get you thinking about how sometimes the reader is pulled immediately into the discussion, right? That you can see that you're being, in a sense, positioned in this, here's what you as the reader might get out of it, or here's what readers might get out of the book or might want to gain from the book. So I did make a few notes that, the article still engages in culturally aware discourse. It's not that the writer is trying to ignore the very, very controversial, really charged, important issues at the center of the book, but the tone is more tempered, more even, because the intention is more informative than if we look, for instance, at the IEEE review, where let me see if that's, here we go. So this review is 943 words. It's a little longer, but the author's name, Katz, is used approximately 6 times. So it's about half of how often it's used in the previous. And in some ways, we could consider this review a polemic. It's a very highly charged kind of discourse on a topic. it's an impassioned plea to really, really, have your readers think in this way about a topic and to share, to express your opinion. On the other hand, the layout is very crisp. It's a very crisp sans serif font. In other words, it's not like Times New Roman with those little things, little flippy things on the end. The layout is very geometric and linear. There's also an interesting use of cliches in this document, which is sometimes comes with polemics or that kind of impassioned argument. Why do you think cliches would be built in to a polemic? Just in case, a cliche is sort of an overused term that, it's kind of like in today's society. So I'm sure you have terms in Russian also that they're very generic, overused. So why do you think this kind of writing would use cliches? In rhetoric, the ancient art of rhetoric, way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, it was really considered an appeal. You're appealing to your audience, your intended audience. So we know that there are many readers from different kind of audiences of journals, but when you're writing something, you have to have one specific audience readership in mind so that you can gauge your language choices, your topical choices. And I would say, yes, that this could be a very deliberate appeal to that sort of like, thinking about it this way. In the IEEE, I'm not too familiar with this journal. So the journal itself may lean more because it is more history, this kind of, oh, come on, Les, kind of informational resources. So it's appealing, and so it might lean more towards this, but I suspect that for engineers, they would still need a way in, right? This is more philosophical, this is more political, this is more journalistic. So how do we connect with our engineers? I'm giving you a list of questions, and what I'd like to do, think about how you might answer some of these questions. And also, this is geared more towards your discipline. Just take a few minutes to think about a couple of these questions. One is, let's translate this question a little bit for this purpose. How is the writer establishing credibility in the particular book review? Just discuss, how does the writer establish credibility in writing? And think about whether you can identify the discipline that you think that review and that journal are part of. So Prometheus tends to be more of a philosophical journal, but it is arguing political points, political perspectives. Reorient, you want to think about this in terms of more sort of a cultural theory and focused on the positioning of things like ideology and race in the sort of in the Middle Eastern Mediterranean area. So it's more of a cultural, sociological approach. These 7 questions are related to you now. How do researchers in your discipline communicate knowledge in writing? So how is knowledge presented in writing? How do researchers in your discipline establish credibility in writing? What methods do researchers in your discipline use to collect information and data? How do they describe these methods in writing? How do research in your discipline analyze and report on this information or data in writing. And then we're going to get down to something that might be a good question to concentrate on in the next activity or discussion. How do research in your discipline use language, vocabulary, voice, formality, structure in writing? How are articles published in your discipline used by other researchers or experts in that discipline? And how are they used to inform or strengthen knowledge in less experienced learners and scholars in the discipline? I want you thinking now about your various fields of study. If it is helpful to you, and it might be, you might each refer to a scholarly journal in your discipline. We're now going to kind of start applying this to book reviews in your field. Start by examining the journal that each review was published in. So it's not about just identifying obvious things. It's about really starting to figure out, how could I do this if I were doing this? Well, thank you all very much.